We are live right now. James, thanks for coming back on and doing this live portion with me, after the fact. I do appreciate that. Just for, if people are only watching this and they haven't, watched the other podcast, I have to reintroduce you a little bit. So tell everyone exactly, who you are and what your company is about.
For sure. My name is James, and I'm a co-founder at Sana Packaging. We're a sustainable packaging brand that designs and develops cannabis packaging using plant-based, reclaimed, and recycled materials. Our mission is to reduce the impact of single-use packaging in the cannabis industry, and our vision is to ultimately transition cannabis packaging from a linear economic model to a circular economic model that's meant to eliminate waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate our natural systems.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, while we were in the episode, but we just didn't get around to it, what exactly, can consumers do? So the average everyday person, listens to this podcast, and they hear, us talking about, sustainability and this industry, and they want to do something to get more involved. What exactly can someone do, I guess, in order to get more involved in helping this movement go a little bit further?
Yeah, I mean, specifically in cannabis, if you live in a state with a legal or medical cannabis market, the number one thing you can do as a consumer is when you are visiting your local dispensary is to let them know that things like sustainable packaging matter to you, and ask them whether any of the brands that they carry use sustainable packaging, or ask them, and if not, ask them why. And things like that can go a long way.
Absolutely. So, one of the things I want to just come back to a topic we touched on in the podcast, because again, some people are probably watching for the first time right now. What exactly are some of the challenges that the industry is facing right now? And what exactly, I guess, could the government more or less do to kind of free up this industry a little bit more?
Yeah, so there's a ton of challenges with cannabis packaging. From a regulatory standpoint, in a lot of states, it has been difficult to recycle cannabis packaging, even if it is recyclable, because recyclers have sometimes been afraid to collect cannabis packaging because cannabis is still not federally legal, and for lack of a better term, used cannabis packaging has drug residue on it. So that's been a challenge in a number of places, is recycling it, even if it's recyclable. Other challenges come in the form of other regulatory requirements, like the child resistance requirements for cannabis packaging. Like I mentioned on the main portion of the podcast, a recent study out of McGill University in Canada showed that if we got rid of child resistance requirements for non-activated products like flower and pre-rolls, we could reduce cannabis packaging waste by upwards of 75%. Some of the other challenges, there's market. So, those that I mentioned are regulatory. There's also market challenges. So because cannabis is siloed into these state by state markets, regulations are not always the same in each market. So this can be difficult from a packaging perspective because some markets might require opaque packaging while others do not. And some might require a specific wall thickness for cannabis packaging while others do not. And so when you're trying to design a product, whether it's sustainable or not, you're trying to make it usable by the largest amount of folks possible. And so, when we're developing a new product, we have all these, kind of micro considerations to take into place. And then there's also just kind of some strange packaging trends in cannabis packaging that, certainly, can be considered greenwashing. A really interesting one that we've noticed is
Could you tell me what you mean by that? What do you mean by greenwashing?
so by greenwashing is when a company basically touts something as sustainable for marketing purposes, but
Okay.
if you dig into it a little more, you kind of find out that that's not really true. That X, Y, or Z practice isn't really sustainable. And this isn't just in cannabis. There's greenwashing in every industry. But a really interesting packaging trend in cannabis packaging right now is the use of biodegradability additives
Right.
in petroleum-based plastics. And the reason I think this one is so interesting is, well, it's being used. So basically, the way this works is you can take a petroleum-based plastic and you can infuse that polymer with these biodegradability additives that technically make a petroleum-based plastic biodegradable or oxodegradable or biodegradable in landfills. There's like a number of ways you can frame it. But this is a current trend in cannabis packaging, which I find very interesting because these additives had kind of a short-lived life in the greater world of packaging back in the early 20-teens, so like 2013, 2014. These biodegradability additives briefly became popular in the greater world of packaging, but very quickly were deemed to not really be solving a problem. And at first people thought, hey, this makes, petroleum-based plastics biodegradable in landfills, like, isn't that good? But the Sustainable Packaging Coalition ended up putting out, a very extensive paper about why that's not good for landfills, and then also how it outside of landfills, it basically, a biodegrading piece of petroleum plastic just leads to microplastics. So there's a number of reasons why these types of materials were deemed unsustainable, and like the greater world of packaging in 2014 was like, oh, okay, we're not going to do this anymore.
Okay.
And that trend like went away, and now it's like popped up in cannabis, and tons of there's a ton of cannabis packaging options out there that use these materials. And I think part of it is the cannabis industry really wants to be sustainable. And so, we'll kind of grasp on to anything that might be sustainable. And so, yeah, so that's just like an interesting thing to have watched happen, because the rest of the world of packaging has said no to this material a number of years ago, yet here it is popping up in cannabis and kind of becoming quite the trend.
Right. So,
so
there was
very long-winded answer to your question.
There was another thing that you kind of already answered it when we did the podcast version just a minute ago. And so for those of you who are watching this live, definitely make sure that you're subscribed to the physical podcast, Independent Thoughts, so that you can listen to the rest of our conversation. But one of the other things that we touched on was ocean-bound and reclaimed, ocean plastics.
Mm-hmm.
When you decided to also like incorporate that into your products, why? Like what was the reason to kind of like go out and seek that out? And is it something that you're planning on doing more of in the future?
Yeah, and actually that's kind of interesting to bring up from a greenwashing perspective as well, because I think ocean plastics have been popular for a number of years now, and it's been growing in popularity. And right when we started using ocean-bound and reclaimed ocean plastics in 2018, I believe, we just referred to the material as reclaimed ocean plastic. But then it was brought to our attention that could be considered greenwashing, because you're basically telling folks that, you're taking plastic out of the ocean and putting it back into the marketplace, which is all well and good, but that's not always literally the case. So we moved from, just saying reclaimed ocean plastic to ocean bound and reclaimed ocean plastic, to be more transparent about where the material is coming from. So there's basically 5 different collection areas, ranging from waterways to near shore to deep sea, and back to your actual question, though, which is kind of how do we think about it? It's, we view these materials as stranded resources. And in our minds, for, for cannabis packaging specifically, there's really no reason to be using any virgin petroleum materials. And if we're able to take these stranded resources, which have escaped our waste stream and made their way into the environment, and we're able to take these materials out of the environment, whether it's ocean bound or in the ocean, and put those materials back into the marketplace and extend their useful lives, and then hopefully they end up in the proper waste stream, we see that as a net positive.
Okay. So do we have time for a quick audience question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. So, our one question here from Twitch is, like how hard was it to switch to ocean plastic?
Well, it's an interesting question because we started off, we've always been a sustainable packaging brand. It's kind of our one core focus is on sustainability. So it's not like we were switching from, a regular petroleum resin to an ocean bound or reclaimed ocean resin. So from that perspective, it was an easy switch because it wasn't a switch. That said, it was very difficult to get that supply chain up and running. When we first started using ocean bound and reclaimed ocean materials, we only had one source. Now we have several sources. And, for that period of time where we only had one source, what would happen? And we were one of their smaller customers. So, what would happen if we weren't able to source that material all of a sudden? And we dealt with that with our hemp plastic material as well, starting from just working with one single supplier, which is super risky, to now having multiple suppliers. So the biggest challenge, I think, was, going from one supplier to multiple and knowing that in the time that we had one supplier, if something were to go wrong, we could potentially be pretty screwed. And then another challenge with using the ocean-bound and reclaimed ocean materials was, early on when we were really just a fledgling startup, we had to find material suppliers that were willing to work with us, and we had to find manufacturers that were willing to not just work with us, but work with these unconventional materials. So really the challenge was all around kind of connecting those dots. And, with a lot of hard work and perseverance, now we're in a much more stable position with multiple suppliers and multiple manufacturers, all of whom we've now built, multi-year relationships and trust with. But yeah, it was really hard to get all of that up and running.
Okay. So James, thank you so much for all of your time today. As we're closing this out, I think the last thing I want to ask is, could you just let everyone again just know exactly who you are, what your company does, what's your company's mission, and where people can find out more about you?
Yeah. I'm James, co-founder of Sana Packaging. The best places to learn about us are at our website at sanapackaging.com, and that's SANA packaging, and then also on Instagram, which is just at Sana Packaging. And we are a sustainable packaging brand that designs and develops cannabis packaging using plant-based, reclaimed, and recycled materials. Our mission is to reduce the impact of single-use packaging in the cannabis industry, and our vision is to ultimately transition cannabis packaging from a linear economic model to a circular economic model meant to eliminate waste and pollution, keep products and materials in use, and regenerate our natural systems.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who came by and watched this live, or if you're watching this on YouTube or Twitch in the future, thanks for being subscribed. If you're not currently subscribed, now is the time to subscribe. Okay. Thank you for being on here today. We'll see everyone in the next video.